When the Fool travels across the tarot deck, they take on the position of the gods presiding over the major arcana. But at the end of the long journey is the predetermined finality, for outside of the cave is a bigger cave, and the Honkai Star Rail universe is also stuck in two different types of loop, exactly like Emphorius. After all, a major component of the world card, the final card of the deck, is the Oroboros that eats its own tail, encircling a man or a woman inside it, signifying the triumph of eternity. Or in the words of Cyrene, an eternal page for the story to be written. Disclaimer: this video contains spoilers for the Metamorphosis, a short story by Franz Kafka, and Kafka on the Shore, a novel by Murakami. And, because of this, there will be discussion of abuse, suicidal ideations, death by turning into bugs, incest, Oedipal complex, and war. Please take care when you watch this video if you're sensitive to any of these topics. Another thing I would like to note is that this graph I will be talking about here is just a quick visualization of the timelines and is not meant to be a comprehensive summary of all timelines. There are probably more timelines than could be expressed in this picture, so please keep that in mind when I explain this graph later on. In 3.7, when Noose asked us what was the meaning of the Trailblaze, depending on your answer, you can see another version of the Trailblaze, whose image overlaps with that of Cyrene as the simulation of both Remembrance and Trailblaze in Emphorius. So yes, it's pretty much confirmed that the heirs and titans as simulations of the paths don't actually stay on only one path, mostly because Cyrene went and retroactively gave everyone the choice to develop their own ego to stabilize the cause and effect of the time loop when she traveled back in time. The ego here is the exact same Hindu-Buddhist true ego, or Atman, translated as human ego in Honkai 3 for Alicia. And it is this ego that allows everyone to choose their own paths beyond what the scepter assigns them. This is a pretty important plot point, and I will elaborate on that later on, so please keep that in mind while you go through this video. But more than that, what Noose, Ligus, Cyrene, and Herta revealed to us is that there is, in fact, both a samsara and an eternal recurrence going on here for the wider scale universe, exactly like how it is in Emphorius. Mirroring Anax's discovery of the samsara in 3.2, Noose's fourth instant with Irontom's destruction of the universe, and Cyrene's subsequent save Scum showed us that the universe has perished countless times before, from border trade war, to the First Emperor's wars, to the fall of the Emperor, to the wars among the Aeons, at the beginning and the end of the universe. In other words, the events of the past, from Swarm, to Gold and Gears, to Unknowable Domains, are all different iterations of the same fate retroactively ordained by the ending of the story, the finality, like how the same general plot is mirrored by the previous generations of humans and titans on Emphorius from Phase 1 to Phase 3, before Phaenon started his eternal recurrence set of loops in Phase 4. Hence, why the story of the Beyond the Sky Choir twins keep being repeated across multiple sets of twins and different selves under the rule of equilibrium, from Sunday and Robin, to March and Evernight, to Phaenon and Reaver, to Cyrene, and even to us, Akivili, and the inverse Akivili. Of course, as Anaxa is unable to discover that Emphorius is not only in a samsara, but also in an eternal recurrence, Ligus didn't realize that there is also an eternal recurrence going on in the bigger cave. Just the eternal recurrence in Emphorius can be easily deducted from the sheer existence of Reaver, which, by the way, I totally got it right in 3.2. The eternal recurrence in the wider universe can be easily deducted from two data points, Fuli and us, the inverse of Akivili. For the first data point, we were told that Fuli actually hasn't been born yet in the current time frame. But in the future, Fuli will have actually ascended and fragmented themselves at the end of all things, scattering their memories across the timeline to become the pure children, one of whom will one day ascend again as Fuli at the end of the universe, closing the cause and effect of the eternal recurrence, exactly like what Cyrene did at the end of 3.7, when she became small Cyrene, who would set off on her own flame chase journey across the time loops to bring love to the lonely demiurge in the cave, who is, in fact, herself. Cause and effect is reversed, because there's an eternal recurrence set of time loops in the wider universe, too. On a side note, I'm pretty sure Dr. Primitive actually studies the origin, albeit in a funky way. At least, his subject of study is a blatant parody of the mockery Charles Darwin used to receive when he published his book on the origin of species. For the second data point, the other obvious proof for the eternal recurrence is our meeting with our other self in the quest and our conversation with Nous. In programming language, the exclamation symbol is prefixed to expressions to denote negation. In a universe ruled by the equilibrium's zero-sum game, everything in the world has its opposite. Just like magnets have poles, charges have positive and negative, and living beings have life and death. Your opponent is your inverse. If you are righteous, they are wicked. Contrarily, if you are evil, they are good. The arbitrator will build a bridge, allowing you to exchange imaginary energy in virtual combat and like the two ends of an hourglass, ultimately achieving harmonious unity. This is zero-sum. After the countering ends, nothing increases nor decreases. In other words, as Nous has stated, we are not Akivili. Backed by the equilibrium's zero-sum principle, we are the inverse Akivili, created to balance out the original Akivili, the other self who appeared before us, and who has not seen the end. As the Akivili who trailblaze because we are already on this road, we have seen the end that the other self has not. Ergo, we are basically the real universe version of the amnesiac small Cyrene at the end of 3.7, while the other self we saw was the equivalent of the demiurge cube at the start of the journey. So in plain terms, the other self is the original Akivili, who will become Terminus at the end of their journey, who will travel back in time as the shapeless prince against the current, who will recruit Kafka into the Stellar and Hunters, who will die and be resurrected by Kafka, who will become us. It should be pretty much the exact same plot with Cyrene and small Cyrene, the simulations of not only the Remembrance but also the Trailblaze, the path in which the fourth and true finality is hiding in, the alternative answer to the Remembrance's big chill in the option A that was not chosen in this merry-go-round.
听我说，记住这段话，然后忘掉它，让它沉睡在你的记忆深处，直到未来的某一天被唤醒。那时，你的旅途将与记忆交错，在艾利欧遇见的多数可能性中，它都指向一次巨大的危机。你会经历背叛，陷入迷茫，需要答案。所以，在聆听这段话前，我希望你不要把它当作某种预言。引导你走到这一刻的，是你自己做出的选择。我不知道那时的你经历了多少，那时的我在你眼中又是否值得信任？但如果你尚有一丝困惑，希望这番话能鼓励你。你是为了银河的愿望而启程的，在以你为主角的故事里，宇宙会逃离终末的命运。记下4这个数字，在墨王的预言里，4条命途会将银河推向终结，你会在旅途中与他们一一邂逅。毁灭、同邪、虚无，还有放轻松，相信你的记忆。第4道命途还未完全展现他的面容，所以旅途才有意义，不是吗？即便在注定的剧本里，我们也有机会写下可能性，一种自己更喜欢的可能性。所以听我说，收下这份纲领，然后忘记它吧，以自己的意志扩写人生。一如过去的你，在完成种种壮举的同时，从未忘记过追逐自由。
真情流露，我都要潸然泪下了。
我们都活在剧本里，但为台词增添几分色彩，从来不是禁忌。
那几条分支剧情不打算细说吗？算了，言多必失。准备好，他要醒了。
In 15th century Italy, the earliest world cards were inspired by the imagery of the triumph of eternity. In the poem Triumphs by Petrarch, eternity is the final figure that triumphs over all at last beheld a world made new and changeless and eternal. I saw the sun, the heavens, and the stars and land and sea unmade, and made again more beauteous and more joyous than before. In the poem, the love interest of the narrator, Laura, was killed by death, and so, at the end of the poem, the narrator finds consolation in the prospect of being reunited with Laura in heaven, the triumph of eternal memories over all. Or, in the case of Amphorius, the promise of eternity after a long separation. In the early Tarot de Marseille decks, the center of the world card is a man wreathed in a halo. This man is usually interpreted as Jesus Christ, having reached the eternity of heaven. However, from the 17th century onward, a new interpretation of the world card emerged, replacing the male figure in the center with a dancing woman wearing a red scarf, representing the world's soul as the bride of Christ, who is also known as Sophia, the syzygy, twin and other half, of Jesus in Gnosticism. And yes, unlike modern-day Christianity, the Bride of Christ is not a metaphor for religious organizations, but is an actual goddess in Gnosticism, early Christianity, and the ancient Canaanite religions. And said goddess is just the Gnostic version of Inanna, as is the unofficial rule for Europe and the Middle East, where everyone and their mother is a variant of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love. I have explained this way back in 3.3, but the whole plot between Zephyro and Phaenon, as is the whole plot between Cyrene and the Trailblazer, are basically Hoyo's remix of Inanna's descent into the underworld. Well, the Zephyro and Phaenon part isn't confirmed yet, but the Cyrene and Trailblazer part has hit the jackpot in 3.4. In the Sumerian story, as Inanna descended into the underworld and was imprisoned there, Demusid must die and become the sacrificial scapegoat for Inanna to return to life, only for the season to change, and Demusid to rise again in spring. In the Gnostic version of the story, as Sophia descended into the material world and was imprisoned there by the Demiurge, a twisted reflection of herself, Jesus Christ must die and become the sacrificial lamb for Sophia to break free from the chains binding her. In Amphorius, the Trailblazer, as the golden scapegoat of the bigger samsara, did descend into the underworld to rescue Sophia, who was truly the syzygy, twin and other half, of the Trailblazer, because she is the literal simulation of the Trailblaze. In Amphorius, she was really imprisoned by a twisted version of herself as the Demiurge. In the option B outlined by Exotail, Myriad, and Herta, Cyrene would really leave the underworld for real on the Astral Express, ascending as Sulii at the end of that journey. And exactly like the Sumerian myth, because of Inanna's escape from the underworld, the Trailblazer as the scapegoat and the entire universe must die in her stead in the Big Chill, creating the cyclicality of the universal samsara. It's just that in our timeline of 3.7, differing from the Sumerian myth of seasonal cycle, this Cyrene chose not to leave the underworld to spare us the bad ending of Big Chill, closing the casualty loop on her own. Of course, that doesn't mean that we will not meet her again, just that Cyrene is currently delaying the rising part of her dying and rising myth for Amphorius. The game has hinted multiple times to us that when the causality of Amphorius is stable enough, she would be free to reunite with us, the Demusid of the bigger universe outside of Amphorius, one last time. Just as Raiden Mei was reunited with Alicia at the end of the long journey, just as the twins in Genshin would reunite again at the end of their own long journeys, just as the triumph of eternity promises a reunion with Laura in heaven, we will meet Cyrene again, and we will meet our other self again, the original Akivili, at the end of the long journey, becoming the world, generating energy for the cosmos, encircled by an Oroboros. Thus, this is the journey of the Fool across the tarot deck. The ending is predetermined by the world. The Fool will set out on their journey, only to end up as the world's finality, only to reset time and become the Fool again, now setting forth on their journey simply because they are already on it. Cause and effect are reversed, and the page with the answer is an eternal blank page. The book is written in reverse chronology, with the ending predetermined. Yet, the cause can be made up arbitrarily. Whoever is the poor soul that is manipulated will have no bearing on the big picture. That said, if Amphorius and Acheron have taught us anything, it's that even if the ending is predetermined, its meaning can still be changed by the journey itself. Nous claimed that we are a nameless one, a fateless one who would plunge the world into chaos. In other words, the existence of us as the inverse of Akivili is a variable that can change the story's direction. Through our interactions with others, we can change others' destiny as well. By choosing to go to Amphorius, we have successfully dodged the Herditum ending, the Selenova ending, the Zephyro ending, and the Jinglu bug ending. By influencing Cyrene, we allowed Amphorius to successfully dodge option B in this cycle. By influencing March, we have convinced Evernight to not delete Amphorius and successfully dodge option A in this cycle. So choices do matter, especially when we have a bunch of pure children running around. Looking back at the recorded timeline of Star Rail, we can pick out some anomalies from the known appearance of Fuli, despite the Enigmata best effort to disguise the time loops. From Texture of Memories, we know that the seeds of Fuli can be either pink, blue, or white. An equation from the Amphorius divergent universe confirmed to us that there could also be yellow and gray seeds. So the coloring isn't limited to just blue and pink. The pink seed in the equation is someone who dreams of becoming a dancer, connecting her to Dolly, also known as Crystal and the Starry Cape Dancer from the Cosmo Odyssey event. Much like Cyrene, Dolly loved the idea of romance, as in the romantic movement, not romance. She joined the Express to write a ballad for the Trailblaze and reportedly met Akivili. After Akivili fell, however, she started her irreversible anomalous crystallization, much like March when she got close to Amphorius. Assuming that she also walked back in time like Cyrene did, we can assume that she also tried to do the same as Cyrene did after she heard of the fall of Akivili, trying to rewrite the causality of Akivili's fall with her own blank page. While we don't know if she was successful or not, what is confirmed is that as of the current timeline, unlike March and Cyrene, Dolly has used up all of her blank pages. After 3 days of continuous singing, she handed over the navigator's role and remained under the stars forever. The yellow seed in the equation should be someone on the Xianzhou, and they're dreaming of becoming a general. While we don't know exactly who this is, it has been hinted at since 1.0 that Xianzhou has an unknown plot going on with Fuli, considering that the Yellow Emperor sending them off on their journey in the first place looks suspiciously like Fuli, just, well, yellow. That origin of the Alliance's journey is actually a reference to Xianzhou sending ships to seek the immortal mulberry tree, and the theme of Xiling is very obviously the tomb of Xianzhou, which aligns with the iron tomb of the Demiurge in Amphorius. For now, we don't have enough information to make a solid conclusion, but I think it's quite safe to assume that the Xianzhou figure of Xianzhou should be a creation of the yellow seed mentioned in the equation, and that seed is currently in the tomb at Xiling. Incidentally, the name of the arbitrator general for Xiling is Wu, which means existence and nothingness, and their title is Chenming, which means beyond the mortal world. Both of these names strongly reference the syncretic Buddhist and Taoist concept of the void as the true ego that exists beyond the mortal world. If this theory about the yellow seed being on Xiling is true, then there is probably a stable time loop going on with Xianzhou existence, much like Cyrene and Amphorius. But unlike Amphorius, the time loop here isn't perfect, and the aftereffect of this in Xianzhou might be the true reason why their memoria is polluted, preventing them from ascending through the method of the abundance and causing their fall into Mara. But the details of that is another topic for another video. The gray seed in the equation is quite obviously Cyrene, who is actually a simulation of both the Remembrance and the Trailblaze at the same time. Notably, we have been consistently described as gray by multiple characters in the game. So the gray seed that is the failed experiment should be no one else but the Demiurge, who was a Nous experiment and was blasted with a Stellaron by Ligus, losing her ego in the process, only for her to regain it again after 3.7. Another seed that was not directly named but did appear in the simulated universe record is the Fuli that appeared before Louis Fleming during Gold and Gears. At that time, Dongfang Qixing was staging the border war to push Louis Fleming from the leadership position, hogging the cast iron throne and the finality's omens for himself. In Louis Fleming's last appearance, the IPC caught sight of Fuli, and that was also when Noose 3 revelations were revealed. With information from 3.7, when Noose confirmed to us that we did meet them during Gold and Gears, we have now realized that the universe did end multiple times from the Border War to the Emperor's Wars, and that moment where Fuli was recorded was also the reset point of that eternal recurrence, staged by that pure child recorded as Fuli. Albeit, this pure child is not the remembrance of Cyrene, but is affiliated with the Enigmata, emerging from the Garden of Blessed Insight. This is probably the pure child running the garden, and the one who initially worked with Telora Farnsha in the first place to develop the memory bubble, which was eventually pushed aside for Corapeo's Synthesia Beacon project instead. Safe to say, she was on the same side as Louis Fleming against Dongfang Qixing. When Dwayne made his way to the cast iron throne, he ran across her and believed her to be an ancient wealth guardian. She is described as a woman, with long hair that cascaded down to her toes, and she engaged in a fight with Dwayne to prevent him from reaching the throne. Apparently, Dwayne killed her, forcing her to reset to delay Noose 3rd instant. The next thing we saw was her sleeping visage through Akivili's eyes of the last loop. She probably has been dead even longer than the time non-organic lives have existed. She lies on her side upon a cast iron throne with all sorts of things scattered around her, untold riches, characters that represent power, an hourglass that manages time, and an emaciated, ferocious hound. The hound rests on the ground, waiting for its owner, who seems to be in an eternal slumber. You know that many things took place after the slumber, and it all started with the cast iron throne. Without gaining any new insights and having your questions answered, you have no choice but to keep going, wondering when to stop. Just like in 3.7, it was then that Noose appeared and addressed Akivili. They utter a word no more, and that is all there is to answer. You might have asked them something, or you might not. Everything has already happened. After the cast iron throne changed hands, the equilibrium tilted slightly. Gold, bricks, blood, energy, science, enlightenment, and ignorance flowed in trickling streams from the equilibrium. As a result, some lost their existences, and some embraced the nihility. Then there was a chime, much like what happens when Cyrene went back in time to fill in the causality, albeit this one is unsuccessful. The sky is overcast and shrouded in a blood-like layer. Flocks of birds flee among the withered flowers and trees, and fruits are left rotten on the ground. The third moment calculated by Noose has come. When the 17th chime stops, number 27 Rupert is killed by number 4 Polka Kakamond. It is an encounter between two geniuses. She has ended its journey as well as the universe-wide war it brings about. In short, the pure child running the garden at the time of Gold and Gears is actually the Enigmata. To stabilize the time loop of Gold and Gears, she has had to do what Cyrene did in 3.7, sacrificing herself to delay the certainty of Noose 3rd instant, but Polka did the deed anyway, and the First Emperor's war ended with the death of the first Rupert. Even though she failed to subvert Noose, the timeline we are experiencing right from 1.0 to 3.7 are the results of the Enigmata pure child sacrifice. And reality is a Penrose staircase of mythos. Due to the lack of information about that pure child of the garden at the moment, we will call her the White Swan for now, to parallel her to the Black Swan. By the way, isn't it suspicious that Black Swan tried to get into March's room before Amphoria started? After the event of Gold and Gears, it is certain that someone else is running the garden instead of the sleeping White Swan. That someone else is most likely the other half of the White Swan, much like how March is paired with Evernight and Cyrene is paired with the Demiurge. It is this unknown half of the White Swan that sent her minions after March and Cyrene. We don't know much about her, or her inverse, as of now, but what we do know is that Black Swan has all the signs of a pure child herself, even if she is not fully one. For one, her animation where she danced the rondo with Acheron has always been a direct reference to the dance with ego that Alicia had with Acheron at the end of Elysian Realm. For 2, her 6th Eidolon, Pantheon Merciful, Masses Pitiful, also looks suspiciously like the depiction of Alicia as the Sophia of Elysian Realm. You can notice that the hand positions are identical. At the same time, the stained glass halo in the backgrounds of Black Swan's Eidolon and Alicia are also extremely similar to that of the princess card in Black Swan's trailer. For context, in the trailer, Black Swan flipped her cards constantly, swapping between Black Swan, White Swan, the princess card, and the beast card. These artificial names and are just my shorthands, so their actual names may vary. But it's pretty easy to see that the White Swan card is supposed to be the princess card, and the Black Swan card is supposed to be the beast card, considering that Black Swan's ultimate is literally her using that beast card to summon a bunch of hands with 4 fingers each. Black Swan calls them the depth of the abyss, and the background for the Black Swan card is identical to the Enigmata, further connecting her to the White Swan of the Garden who worked with the IPC in gold and gears, if not the inverse of the White Swan herself, like how March has Evernight, and Cyrene has the Demiurge. Incidentally, these hands of Black Swan are identical to those of the hands grasping at March in Evernight's Myriad, signaling the Princess Black Swan to be the very same beast on the other side of the card, the same beast card that does true damage in Currency War. From the start, Black Swan has always been a reference to the movie Black Swan, down to the way her clothes are designed after a ballet dancer. The main character of that movie is the White Swan, who hallucinates that a Black Swan is out to get her and replace her. The film strongly uses mirrors as the imagery for the White Swan's shattering minds, and at the finale of the story, the White Swan stabs the Black Swan to death with a mirror shard. Only, it is revealed at the end that the White Swan has been the Black Swan all along, and that she has stabbed herself. Putting everything together, we can see that Black Swan's real identity should be the inverse of the Garden Pure Child, the Evernight to the White Swan's March, the enigmatic Black Swan that covets the memories of Fuli at the end of the universe. She does like pure memories, and which memories are purer than those of Fuli. In effect, her goal is identical to that of the White Swan, albeit she is more polite about it, sneaking into March's room aside. Long ago, way back in May 2024, I theorized that Black Swan is Razalina, who appeared as the Mirror Princess running away from the Mirror Kingdom in Misha's story. The Mirror Kingdom is, of course, the garden here. My theory was that Razalina faked her death and sent us the invites so that we would arrive at Penacony and give it a good ending with the path of Trailblaze. In the Ghost Ship story, which is inspired by Alan Wake and the Black Swan movie, a female scientist shattered herself into many soul fragments when she fell into the sea of memories. Every cycle, she tries to get back onto the ghost ship and kills the previous version of herself, only for her to be killed by the next version of herself in the next cycle. This ghost ship later became the Radiant Field Spar, on which sometimes you will run into people with no tongue and prison areas you haven't seen before. Also, according to Cecil's radio broadcast, the staff are fake, if Leo is to be trusted. When 3.3 hit, I was understandably a bit confused when it was revealed that Razalina was alive up until then, but she turned into foam at the finale but somehow still shattered herself into many soul fragments. But now, after 3.7, the entire thing makes sense now if we consider Razalina and Black Swan to be pieces of the same person, Fuli, and the same female scientist who fell off the ghost ship into the Sea of Memories, aligning with the recorded death of Razalina. So presumably, Razalina is another pure child who ran away from the garden only to fall into the memory zone and shatter into fragments herself. Black Swan's personal matter that compelled her to visit Penacony is the same as that of the female scientist in the ghost ship and the White Swan of the garden in Amphoreus. She wants to absorb the other pieces of Fuli, but she is polite about it. Hence, she granted Razalina's wish first before absorbing her, and the last of Razalina's memories finally turned into foam. Ergo, that is probably her goal with March and Cyrene and Amphoreus here. She wants to grant their wishes so that she can absorb them at their happiest moment, albeit that plan was foiled by Evernight and the Trailblazer in Amphoreus, and March is safe for now. The blue seed in the equation is obviously March, who wore blue and is a traveler on the Astral Express. Depending on how much you trust Evernight's account, March is supposed to take a similar role to Cyrene in the future and sacrifice her own memories for the fate of the world. While Evernight is rather dubious by her nature, this plot is also backed by the Amphoria simulation, in which March became an unseen entity and her memories were put on a scale to outweigh the fate of the world, aligning with Evernight's account. Since March does have the game mascot privilege, I think it's safe to say that March is the true ego that would become the origin of love in the finale of the game, replacing Cyrene, who became the remembrance of Lament in Timeline B. There's actually a wordplay between love and lament that did not get translated well in the 3.7 main quest. Lament is actually Alan, compassion, sorrow, lament in Chinese, versus the love, al, of Philia and Honkai impacts Alicia. Lament is a pun on the first two characters of 80s Alicia, as compassion and lament, unlike Alicia's love, and this is also the characters used for the name Ely that the Demiurge used at the end after she turned into Cyrene. When the small Cyrene met the Demiurge and compelled her to fall in love with herself, the Demiurge misheard Cyrene's lament for love, which had a different tone.
桃子的话不懂，是因为我还没理解爱。但没关系，我可以学。对了，查找西连。
电信号序列非2093。
怎么没想到呢？不用自己一个人，可以让桃子教我呀。什么是爱？什么是爱恋？
电信号序列非2093。路径爱恋。
哎，好像有哪里不太对。
She also mistook the second character for Cyrene's name, Land of Ripple, for Land Compassion. As a result, both Cyrene are less Alicia and more the equivalent of the Hershers of corruption from Honkai Impact, albeit the version that declared herself to be the witness of love in the recent event rather than Elysian realm itself. As the ego developing from the machine, Cyrene is the flawed human, representing the lament of the remembrance as a path, having fallen in love with herself because she mistook herself for the flawless divinity of love, I, the true path of which is the trailblaze brought about by March and the trailblazer. In other words, the remembrance, the true nature of which is Cyrene's flawed lament, is an alternate possibility, or a different facet of March's flawless love, which is a transformed remembrance that had been given an ego by the trailblaze to presumably become the origin, much like how the Cyrene of this cycle has grown from lament to love with her own hero's journey. In the timeline of Option B, because Cyrene hogged the role of the fourth finality, the Remembrance's Big Chill became the fourth finality, preventing the origin from being born. But in the timelines branching off from 3.7, Cyrene has rejected her own ascension as the remembrance to become the love that March, her alternate future self, represents. As such, the slot for the fourth finality is now open for either March or any other pure child to take on and redefine the fourth finality. Ergo, this should be where the problem lies the entire time for the messy relationship between the remembrance, the enigmata, the origin, and the beauty. They are effectively different fragments of the same mirror, representing different possibilities for the fourth finality across multiple timelines. I have discussed how the enigmata and the origin's positions are alternate selves of the remembrance in 3.6 through Buddhism, so if anyone is interested, you can check out that video. Though it's important to note that our current timeline in 3.7 likely did not descend directly after Option B. Because the back of the world right now is actually the Enigmata and the events of the Enigmata Pure Child during Golden Gears, there is actually an Option B2 hidden between B and C, and the world of that Option B2 ended up with the Enigmata ascending as the fourth finality. This world line where the Enigmata is the final answer was rejected by the Pure Child during Gold and Gears, leading to our current world as Option C. In Option C, the beauty is imprisoned behind the mirror in this timeline because until Cyrene decided her own fate in 3.7, the remembrance of Cyrene was supposed to be the fourth finality like Option B, preventing the beauty from actually coming into existence, up until the 3.7 changed the trajectory of the story. The beauty's fall can only be seen through the mirror because it happens in the future of an alternate timeline, and this timeline could not become real until Cyrene gave up her future as the remembrance in 3.7. Speaking of Amphoreus, the simulated path of the beauty expressed itself as Aglaea, the leader of the flame chase. An interesting thing about Aglaea is that she also has her own inverse in the form of the dressmaker, which acts as an extension of herself, but also is modeled after the servant girl who died protecting her in her youth. As the heir of romance, Aglaea is connected to both the beauty and Tazzy. The dressmaker functions as the Tazzy part, governing over the nymphs, which are actually creations of Phanon over the samsara, aligning with the ankle guy's role in the ascension of Tazzy in the Swarm disaster. Of course, Aglaea herself functions as a simulation of Adryla. But what's interesting here is that she has a suspicious amount of similarity to another character we have known since year one. As a dressmaker and the weaver of fate, she manipulates destiny through her golden threads. With her threads, she can listen to people's thoughts and bind them to her will, manipulating as if they are her puppets, or you can say, destiny's slaves. And most critical of all are her eyes, her golden blood flaw. Having traded her sight for the ability to see all and listen to all, Aglaea's eye design has always been very unique, and that uniqueness is only shared with one other person. One other person who can make others listen to her. One other person who is tied to the imagery of a chrysalis waiting for metamorphosis. One other pink person who appeared among the mirror fragments of Fuli, who used golden silk threads to communicate with the trailblazer about Adlavan's history. You see a blurry figure made of mirror fragments, and their facial features are repeatedly refracted by the prism to form a mystery. Countless memories spring up before your eyes. You see Kafka. Her body is stretched, deformed, and rubbed together with the umbrella in her hand, turning into water droplets and falling at your feet. You find yourself become a weeping Adlavan baby with an uncut umbilical cord. You remember that there is a golden scar on your body and golden blood flowing on the dying planet. You find yourself dark-skinned and wearing a robe on the wasteland. You find that you are a swift shadow across the abyss, reaching out to catch the shooting star. Then their voice suddenly came. The robe flutters and wraps around your dark skin. You laugh at exploration. The silk threads spin, overlap, and weave into oceanic words. Every word they say is connected to each other like a whisper. Before you could say anything, they suddenly disappear. Wait, let's talk about Kafka. Even though Franz Kafka is Czech, he is pretty popular in East Asia, where people like to name their characters after him for some reasons. Known for his mix of realism and surrealism, one of Kafka's most notable works was Metamorphosis, a story about a man who transformed into a bug. While it is debatable which bug the man turned into, a literary critic argued that it was a beetle or Coleoptera. You can see where this is going. The main character, Gregor Samsa, was a salesman who suddenly transformed into a bug, probably a beetle one day. Before this transformation, he was the main provider of the family and wanted to fulfill the dream of his sister, Grete, who played the violin, and wanted to go to the conservatory to study. However, because he was inexplicably turned into a bug, he could no longer provide for his family and had to depend on them instead for his daily needs. As a result of this, his family quickly turned against him and started to view him as a monster. His father was violent toward him, further worsening his situation. An apple his father threw at his back was stuck there, causing such a severe wound that he could eat very little afterwards. His mother was torn between maternal instinct and disgust, but later also started to only feel disgust toward him and nothing else. His sister Grete, the one he loved so dearly, initially tried to take care of him, but she, too, felt that he was nothing more than a burden now that she had to take care of him, and not the other way around. Her resentment grew, and she started to neglect him. Lacking Gregor's financial support, Grete became a salesgirl, unable to fulfill her dream of studying music. However, the last straw came when one day, Gregor, in attempting to cheer for his sister while she was playing violin, scared away the 3 tenants of the house. Even worse, the 3 tenants threatened to sue the family for the unhygienic condition that gave rise to a giant bug, which was no one else but the metamorphosed Gregor. Angered and disgusted, Grete screamed what she had been thinking all this time. She suggested that they get rid of Gregor, no longer a human, no longer her brother, only in her eyes. If it were Gregor, he would have seen long ago that it's not possible for human beings to live with an animal like that, and he would have gone of his own free will, she argued. Having overheard the conversation, Gregor was understandably devastated. He never wanted to scare his sister at all. Laboriously, he crawled his way back to his room and decided to die of starvation. The next morning, the cleaner swept his dried-up corpse away with a broom, while the family pretended to mourn for him. And then instantly, the cleaner was sacked. Grete cheered up and became a blossoming young lady. The parents decided to find a good man for her, and as soon as they reached their destination, Grete was the first to get up and stretch out her young body. As one of Kafka's greatest works, the story is actually semi-biographical. By the time the Metamorphosis was written, Kafka was already diagnosed with laryngeal tuberculosis, no longer able to work and confined to his room, or at the sanatorium. It is presumably this condition that inspired the bug transformation in the story. Notably, later in his life, he alternated between his sister's house and the sanatorium before dying of starvation. The laryngeal tuberculosis made it too painful for him to eat, and he was found dead in his bed editing his last work, The Hunger Artist. That said, it doesn't necessarily mean that his relationship with everyone in the family was exactly like in the Metamorphosis. It's true that his relationship with his father was really that bad, but the sister who took care of him in his last days, Kafka, had a good relationship with him until the end by all accounts. All three of his sisters were killed in the Holocaust, alongside many family members. So please don't conflate his real-life sister with Grete, the fictional account in the Metamorphosis. From this point onward, whenever I'm making a reference to Grete, I mean the fictional character in the story, not the real-life people. And I'm pretty sure Hoyo is basing Kafka on the fictional account too. Back to the Metamorphosis. By now, it's pretty easy to see that Tazzy and their ascension as an aeon out of love and loneliness is based on the plight of Gregor Samsa, the protagonist of the fictional story. While we don't know the exact detail of their rise beyond the detail that they ascended at the tail end of a war between the bounty hunters and the Ankle Guy's force, what is pretty suspicious here is that during the Swarm disaster itself, Fuli was seen as the lamplight of the Oroboros, who showed up to eat the descendants of Tazzy as their archenemies. Initially, I fell for the history fictionologist's account, literally, and assumed that Fuli was a part of Oroboros first before ascending to godhood. But I was totally wrong and mistook cause and effect. In 3.7, it is now confirmed that Fuli will have risen at the end of the universe, and will have instantly shattered to become the time of the universe in the past, in the exact same way Cyrene had to shatter her ego to stabilize the causality of Amphorius in the past. Hence, every instant of Fuli being seen is actually a pure child, as a piece of Fuli, going back in time to fix the casualty of the universal eternal recurrence. As a result of this, we can naturally conclude that the Fuli that we saw as a part of the Oroboros was actually another pure child going back in time to preemptively sacrifice themselves to the Oroboros, presumably to preserve the memories of the people and metamorphosed people, as a direct parallel to Fuli's choice at the end of the universe, and Cyrene's choice in 3.7 for Amphorius. In a way, we can view Swarm as an eternal recurrence in and of itself. It's just that we can only see the specific timeline that leads to our current time instead of other timelines that were reset by the Oroboros pure child. The loop started at the very end, when Fuli ascended as an aeon and shattered into many seeds, one of which went back in time to become the lamplight of Oroboros. Of course, as is the principle of things, whenever the Remembrance goes, the Enigmata tags along to cover up the tracks of a samsara and to tempt people into the sea of oblivion while they're at it. Assuming that the role of Evernight in Amphorius is a parallel to the role of the Enigmata in Swarm, that means that like the fake prophecy given out by Evernight in 3.6, the Enigmata's similarly fake prophecy that made the Ankle Guy went to Lepismat system, which led to the rise of Tazzy in the first place, was specifically spread by the Enigmata in an ill-advised attempt to rescue the Oroboros pure child from their voluntary sacrifice to the Oroboros, which was only made in the first place, because the Enigmata purposely pushed for Tazzy to rise for the pure child's sake. So basically, it's a stable time loop, and Swarm is what happens if Evernight was actually successful in 3.6 when she wanted to delete Amphorius. Not at actually protecting March. successful at guaranteeing March's sacrifice in the future. That is. However, while March and Evernight are pretty clear parallels to the roles of Fuli and Enigmata back in Swarm, I don't think that the pair in Swarm is actually them. Most likely, what's with all the reference to the Metamorphosis, it is Kafka and her inverse, as the Grete and Gregor Samsa of the Swarm Eternal Recurrence. While starting at Zuli is one way we can look at the Swarm loop, another way we can analyze it is by starting at Tazzy, whose role was set determined beforehand, and any candidate could have risen to fulfill that role one way or another. After all, the story is a blank page. The book is written in reverse chronology, with the ending predetermined. Yet, the cause can be made up arbitrarily. Whoever is the poor soul that is manipulated will have no bearing on the big picture. Per the rule of the Beyond the Sky choir, between a pair of twins, one must stay in the past, and one must go forward into the future. Tazzy took on the role of the beast as Gregor Samsa, while the Oroboros pure child took on the role of the beauty as Grete Samsa, blossoming into a beautiful young woman after the death of her brother. A key feature of Grete is her talent with the violin and her ire whenever her music is interrupted. In the story, her playing being interrupted by Gregor was the key event that convinced Gregor to die. And guess who is heavily associated with the violin? Whose weapon is literally strings? Who is seen tied up inside a chrysalis by fate? Who is fated to be the bug written in ink? Who can make others listen to her? Who is Pink? Who wants to change the Trailblaze destiny and also wants to change her own destiny.
去下一个地方，为准备好的未来铺路。这就像织锦一样，你我一次只能编织一条经线，但它最终会变成美丽的图景。
Thus, while Tazzy stayed behind in the past as Gregor the Beast, killed by the Aeons, the veracity disappeared midway through Swarm, presumably transformed into Grete the Beauty in the future. In the exact same vein, the Demiurge went into the past to become Cyrene, who would go on to make the Demiurge fall in love with her and die, only for the Demiurge to become Cyrene again. Only instead of Cyrene and the Demiurge, it's Tazzy and Kafka, in that order, with Tazzy as the small Cyrene in the loops and the current Kafka as the Demiurge. Ergo, if this theory is true, then Kafka will need to go back to the past and become Tazzy again, completing the loop of Swarm. However, even though the ending is predetermined, the meaning can still change, for Kafka here is not only the Kafka of Metamorphosis, but is also a reference to another Kafka, a Kafka who could finally break the loop and kill the snake, a Kafka on the shore. While Franz Kafka and the Metamorphosis are the obvious inspiration for Honkai Star Rail Kafka, another key source for the creation of her imagery as a woman talking to a black cat under an umbrella is Kafka on the Shore, a novel by Murakami Haruki on theme of breaking free from the samsara. Stylistically, Kafka on the Shore took heavy inspiration from Franz Kafka's surrealism, and the story is effectively a Buddhist fix-it version of the Metamorphosis, mixed with many other literary references and a lot of Hegel. The main character of the story is named Tamra Kafka, a 15-year-old boy who ran away from his abusive father and, throughout the story, running away from the samsara of his destiny. In Japanese, Kafka is formed from two components, good and not good, so the character Kafka is a balance, an equilibrium between good and evil throughout the whole series. His father was a famous artist, but their family life was not a happy one. His mother and sister abandoned them when he was 4, while his father was abusive toward him. The father is heavily implied to be Johnny Walker, a serial cat killer, killing cats to make flute out of their souls, with the cat being a not-so-subtle stand-in for Kafka himself, which is also a reference to how Gregor's father grievously wounded him in the Metamorphosis. Here, modeled after Oedipus Rex, is the fate of Kafka, doomed to sleep with his sister and mother and to kill his father, completing the cycle once more. Throughout the whole story, Kafka is always torn between running away from the curse and running toward the curse his father placed upon him, believing fatalistically that he will repeat the footsteps of his father, while at the same time struggling to break free from the cycle. This is the drive that compelled him to run away from his father at the start of the story, and this is also the same drive that compelled him to latch onto people he considered to be the sister and mother that abandoned him, Sakura, the red-haired girl he met on a bus ride, and Miss Saraki, the middle-aged librarian, missing her shadow. When Kafka first met Sakura, he was attracted to her instantly and, as a result, automatically assumed that she was his sister. Yes, in that particular order, as a showcase of Kafka's fatalism. With a cheerful demeanor, Sakura ostensibly approached Kafka because he looked like a famous idol. As Kafka and Sakura grew closer, Sakura revealed that she also tried to run away from home when she was young, albeit she was caught back by her family. Kafka told her about his sister who ran away, which prompted Sakura to buy into his fatalism, believing herself to be really his sister. And yes, they were still attracted to each other. After Kafka killed his father in distress, Sakura was among the people who covered for him. On Kafka's part, he was simultaneously attracted to her and fearing that his hidden violent side would hurt her, while Sakura believed that she was protecting him by acting as his not actually sister and not actually love interest. It is quite evident that Murakami intended Sakura to be a nicer version of Grete Samsa. Instead of being the trigger that pushed her brother to suicide, Sakura always intends to protect her not actually brother, even if the result of her actions might vary. And as the companion of Kafka on the bus ride relationship between Sakura and Kafka is evidently one of the inspirations for the train ride relationship between the Trailblazer and March, as well as that of Trailblazer and Cyrene. Naturally, in the Option B ending of Exotale from the previous cycle, Cyrene chose to run away with the Trailblazer on the train ride, abandoning the causality of Amphorius. Because the causality was not closed, the result of the experiment reverted back to Iron Tomb. As a result, at the end of that timeline, Cyrene ascended as Fuli and enacted Big Chill, freezing Iron Tomb alongside the memories of that timeline as the fourth finality of the universe. Just as Sakura must part ways with Kafka and could not actually heal him by pretending to be his sister, the Cyrene of that Option B timeline also failed to change the definition of the fourth finality. And so, to reset the cycle, Cyrene as Suli shattered herself into many seeds once more, restarting the eternal recurrence, exactly like how 3.7 went. Due to her action, March was born as one of the seeds, as was Evernight as the Kamamara of March, and probably a remix of Iron Tomb from the Option B cycle. In the Scepter record, Cyrene stated that Iron Tomb is actually also her in a sense. Ever since 3.6, Evernight has always had a suspicious amount of parallels to the Demiurge and the Black Tides of Iron Tomb. It was this Buddhist parallel that led me to the conclusion that the Demiurge probably took on the same plot as the Her Share of Corruption, which promptly came true in 3.7. In addition, Mythos is stated to be a counter to Nous, and who else was supposed to be born as a counter to Nous but Iron Tomb? Ergo, if March in our Option C timeline is a seed of Cyrene from Option B, then Evernight in our Option C timeline is probably a piece of Iron Tomb from Option B to parallel the conflict between the true ego, the moon of Atman, and Kamamara, the reflection of the moon in the water. Anyway, since 3.6, it has been subtly implied by Evernight that in our current timeline branching off from 3.7, March would one day have to pay the same price as Cyrene in the Option B ending. How much we can believe this claim is anyone's guess, but I assume that there will be at least one ending where March really would have to stay behind in the garden as the new Fuli. After all, the Eden of Blessed Insights is modeled after a lower Pure Land in Buddhism, and the non-returners of that Pure Land are all waiting for a new Buddha to ascend to bring them to true enlightenment. When the Fool has become the finality and the journey is reset to the origin, someone has to become the new magician as the first card in the deck, just as when Gregor the Beast finally dies, Grete finally blossomed and became the Beauty. However, in Kafka on the Shore, the role of Grete was not only given to Sakura. Murakami also remixed Grete with a mother figure to create Miss Saraki and Nakata, who are the inspirations for the Star Rail Kafka here. If Sakura plays the role of Kafka's sister in the prophecy, then Miss Saraki plays the role of his mother, and the novel implied that she was, in fact, really his mother. When she was young, Miss Saraki had a lover whom she loved very dearly. She composed a song for him and named it Kafka on the Shore, the title of the novel. In the song, she described her lover as such. You sit at the edge of the world. I am in a crater that is no more. Words without letters. Standing in the shadow of the door. The moon shines down on a sleeping lizard. Little fish rain down from the sky. Outside the window there are soldiers, steeling themselves to die. Kafka sits in a chair by the shore, thinking of the pendulum that moves the world. It seems, when your heart is closed, the shadow of the unmoving sphinx becomes a knife that pierces your dreams. The drowning girl's fingers search for the entrance stone and more. Lifting the hem of her azure dress, she gazes at Kafka on the shore. In addition to the song, the lover of Miss Sarki also left behind a painting of himself on the shore, while Kafka was left a picture of his mother and sister on the beach. In Honkai Star Rail, this became a beach trip between the Stellaron hunters before we died and was resurrected by Kafka at the start of the game. This beach trip was used for the art of the 2025 anniversary and was directly confirmed by Kafka to be canon in the Sparkle Drink event. However, in his 20s, the lover of Miss Saeki was tortured to death during a student protest, the protesters having mistaken him for spies. As a result of this, Miss Saeki dropped out of college and attempted to commit suicide in the forest of Mount Fuji. However, she failed and was committed to a mental hospital. Many years passed. She moved to Tokyo and became a writer, and she had family with someone else, albeit she was still not happy. The moment her boyfriend died, a part of Miss Saeki has been lost with him, and she has always stayed the drowning girl searching for the entrance stone, the gate to another world, so that she could turn back time and meet her lover again. Which she finally did, because her lover is Kafka, her own son that she abandoned before the story started. The thing is that Kafka's real name isn't actually Kafka. Kafka is just a name he chose for himself. Kafka also has a secret. He has a split personality named Crow. This is in reference to the real-life Kafka, whose name is similar to the word for jackdaw in Czech. But at the same time, the existence of Crow as an alternate personality or a spirit haunting a person, is also an obvious reference to Pose the Raven, which has already been a reference to Elio the Black Cat in Penacony. Much like Pose Raven and Ghostrick Sissel, and to Lady Kujor from the Tales of Genji, which was directly cited in the story by Murakami. Crow is a wandering spirit, haunting multiple characters in the story, much like how Lady Kujou haunted Yugao in Genji. Before the story began, Crow has already had a history with Kafka, Miss Saeki, and Nakata, the three main characters of the story. When the boyfriend of Miss Saeki was alive, he was a Kafka because he also housed Crow inside him. Hence, the boy in Kafka on the shore is also called Kafka for Crow. It's implied that when her boyfriend died and Miss Saeki went into the woods to commit suicide, she accidentally opened the portal to an alternate dimension, inadvertently inviting the spirit of Johnny Walker, the cat-killing spirit that possessed the body of Kafka's father. Much like the protagonist of Pose the Raven, and much like our Kafka, who took a deal with Elio and had gone through great cost to keep us alive, and eventually, to resurrect us, Miss Saeki was tempted into making a deal with the devil out of grief. To resurrect her boyfriend, she had to trade half of her soul and marry Johnny Walker, and in exchange, her boyfriend Crow would return as her own son, Kafka. Thus, the Oedipal tragedy was set in motion. Kafka was born with a split personality. One half of him was taken out and replaced by Crow. Miss Saeki left half of her soul as a young girl in that wood. The other half returned to reality as an incomplete spirit. The incomplete spirit of Miss Saeki in reality would grow old and give birth to two children, one of whom would house the spirit of her own lover, which prompted her to abandon him from guilt, only for him to find her again in her 50s. And then, at the end, he finally wandered into the same wood where she left her youth behind, reuniting with the younger version of herself again. By the way, there's already a design for a young Kafka in Honkai 3. If this theory is correct, then we would meet a young Kafka again in the future, when we go back to the wood where she left half of her soul behind. Since year 1, we have already known that Fuli was present as the lamplight of the Oroboros. I initially assumed that that was the birth of Fuli before 3.7, but with the reveal that cause and effect are reversed, we can assume that that lamp lights Fuli is actually a seed, going back in time to record the memories of Eladikna, much like how Cyrene went back in time to record the memories of 80s Alicia. Incidentally, Eladikna sounds very much like Alicia. With Kafka being so strongly affiliated with Tazzy through the Metamorphosis since her trailer, and with the plot between Cyrene and the Demiurge, we can assume that the current Kafka is one half of that seed, with the other half being the lamplight of the Oroboros, considering that Tazzy and Oroboros as supposed to be archenemies of each other. We are the enemies of our own inverse, after all. Of course, that is our past, but it is the future of the Kafka we know, who is very obviously not a bug yet. With the eternal recurrence in action, the most probable timeline is that in the future, Kafka, as a seed of Fuli, would ascend at the end of timeline C or D in this graph. I'm leaning towards C at the moment, in which Cyrene rejected the position of Fuli to stabilize Amphorius, leaving the position of Fuli open for Kafka to take, but it could be D as well. It's honestly between March and Kafka for C and D, one of the two. I think it's pretty safe to assume that March is supposed to be the new definition of the origin at the endgame, because she has mascot privilege, then Kafka would not actually be the true Atman of the endgame, much like how Cyrene could only become the big chill of Lament in Option B rather than the true Atman of the bigger universe. Since 2.7, the Road of Prayers has told us that Aglaea's death could only be seen through the mirror of the Remembrance, and that the Aeon of Beauty also shattered into many pieces like Fuli. Ergo, Aglaea's death is directly comparable to that of Amphorius, which could have only been accessed through the Garden's mirror before 3.0. Hence, much like Amphorius, Aglaea's ascension and their death is a texture of memories, preserved by Cyrene as Fuli in Option B in the mirror. In other words, Aglaea the Beauty is another self of the Remembrance, an alternate possibility of Fuli in one possible timeline. And much like Amphorius as the seed that will only become real in the next reset, Aglaea the Beauty has not ascended or fallen yet. Thus, they were imprisoned behind the mirror and could only be seen through the mirror of memories, the memories of an alternate timeline. In that timeline where Aglaea ascended instead of Fuli, or the true origin, where Kafka ascended instead of Cyrene or March, they would shatter into pieces and reset the world line, the half of beauty of which would end up as the lamp light Fuli of the Oroboros, while the half of beast would undergo metamorphosis and become Tazzy. This lamp light of Fuli would eventually lead to Option C, where Kafka ascends instead of March, completing the time loop, much like how Cyrene and the Demiurge must fall in love with herself, and much like how Miss Psyche always seeks her missing youth again, still lost in the woods where she attempted to die. If this is true, then this is most likely what Kafka means when she said we would change each other's destiny, to avert the stable time loop of Option C and pivot to the true end in Option D, the next reset where Amphorius will be real. We must change the meaning of her ending, to change the meaning of the Aeon Tazzy into the beauty. Or, in the language of Kafka on the shore, to kill the proverbial snake at the entrance stone between the worlds. Well, technically, it's not a snake literally. It's just compared to a poisonous snake and described as a long, pale, thin object that was squirming out of Nakata's mouth. The object reminded Hoshino of a gourd. It was as thick as a man's arm, and though he couldn't tell how long it was, Hoshino guessed that about half of it was out. Its wet body glistened like mucus. Nakata's mouth was stretched wide open like a snake's to let the thing out. His jaw must have been unhinged. It was so wide open. This is in reference to the myth of Susanoo killing the snake god, signaling the banishment of evil spirits, but also, it's an obvious metaphor for breaking free of the samsara, with said samsara being the literal Oroboros. You see, the issue with Miss Psyche is that when she made a deal with the devil, she accidentally poked through the portal between worlds, destabilizing not just one world but two. In Kafka on the Shore, the story is not told in a straightforward narrative, but jumps between two different stories. The odd chapters are about the world where Miss Psyche and Nakata lived in, while the even chapters are about the adventure of Nakata and Hoshino, the other selves of the main cast in a parallel universe. Because Miss Psyche made a deal to resurrect her boyfriend in Kafka, half of Kafka's soul was transported to another world and possessed Nakata, a young boy on a school trip at the time. In the Rice Bowl Hill incident, a mushroom cloud suddenly dropped onto a bunch of school children, among which was Nakata. And yes, it's an allegory for the nuclear bomb. The story is actually a long metaphor for the wounds of wars and the cycle of violence. The political view embedded in Kafka on the Shore is pretty neatly summed up in this quote by Murakami. If there is a hard, high wall and an egg that breaks against it, no matter how right the wall or how wrong the egg, I will stand on the side of the egg. Because each of us is an egg, a unique soul enclosed in a fragile egg. Each of us is confronting a high wall. The high wall is the system which forces us to do the things we would not ordinarily see fit to do as individuals. Another quote of his is also quite useful to understand the theme of Kafka on the Shore. Fundamentally, Japanese people tend not to have an idea that they were also assailants, and the tendency is getting clearer. The issue of historical understanding carries great significance, and I believe it is important that Japan makes straightforward apologies. I think that is all Japan can do, apologize until the countries say, "We don't necessarily get over it completely, but you have apologized enough. All right, let's leave it now." Which, along with his many references to Western culture in his works, actually got him condemned as anti-Japan by the ultra-right in Japan. Anyway, with the mushroom cloud hitting everyone, they mostly returned to consciousness just fine, except for Nakata, who had lost the entirety of his memories and his intelligence upon waking up, in exchange for the ability to speak to cats. Much like Gregor Samsa in the Metamorphosis, Nakata was originally from an affluent family, but because of his transformation upon waking up from his sleep, he grew up to be a lonely man who searches for cats for a living, without any family supporting him. In return for gaining half of Kafka's soul, like his other self, Misaki, Nakata also lost half of his soul to Johnny Walker, the cat-killing father of Kafka, becoming a portal for the snake-like spirit of another dimension to enter both worlds, much like how Kafka himself suffered under the Oedipal prophecy put on him by his father. Throughout the story, much like how Kafka was guided by Crow, Nakata was strongly associated with the black cat he could speak to, his spiritual guide against the machination of Johnny Walker inside him, and his umbrella, which he carried around everywhere in case of a rain of fish, just like the lyrics of Kafka on the Shore. The image of Nakata, with a talking black cat under an umbrella, is actually one of the most iconic imagery of the story, being used as the cover for one of the editions for Kafka on the Shore. Being a body housing both the good of Crow and the bad of his father, Johnny Walker, Nakata represents the struggle between the two parts of Kafka's name, and the struggle of free will against the samsara of violence and abuse. In a crucial moment of the story, Nakata's body was taken over by Kafka from the other world, killing his father Johnny Walker to protect the cats, completing the Oedipal curse. But at the same time, at the end of the story, much like how Gregor Samsa chose to die to allow his sister Grete to become the Beauty, Nakata also chose to die, allowing his companion Hoshino, who is also a parallel of Tamura Kafka, and whose name also has the character for star-like Stelly, to kill the snake-like creature that is Johnny Walker once and for all, breaking free of the cycle and closing the portal. A key theme of Kafka on the Shore, as is with Honkai Star Rail, is the butterfly dream. Originating from Zhangzi, a classic Taoist text, the butterfly dream talks about the equality of things. Once Xianzhou dreamed he was a butterfly flitting and fluttering about, happy with himself and doing as he pleased. He didn't know that he was Xianzhou. Suddenly, he woke up and there he was, solid and unmistakable Xianzhou. But he didn't know if he was Xianzhou, who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming that he was Xianzhou. Between Xianzhou and the butterfly there must be some distinction. This is called the transformation of things. In Buddhism, the Buddha argued that the material world we live in is a dream, an illusion of Maya, and that only by achieving enlightenment can we truly wake up from this dream. Nearly 2,000 years later, René Descartes proposed his dream argument against reality. Because the mind cannot be trusted to distinguish reality from dream, it also cannot be trusted to verify that reality is not a dream. Ergo, it can be argued that reality is a simulated dream, and a person perpetually dreaming would not know how to distinguish dreams from reality. Hence, in Honkai Stair Rail, much like the two parallel worlds of the odd chapters and the even chapters, reality is a Penrose staircase representing dreams, and the mortals unaware that they're dreaming are called slumberers. In the dream, we are ourselves, but at the same time, we are our own inverse, traveling in Akivili's place as the butterfly in the dream. And this doesn't only apply to the Trailblazer. Dan Heng directly made reference to it in 3.6, as if he was waking up from a dream of Danfeng, because his real body is most likely still in the Scale Gorge as the Dragon Tree. Also in 3.6, Evernight and March represent another pair of dreamer and butterfly, with March being the butterfly dream that travels the world, while Evernight is the reality deep inside her. In 3.7, the same story is repeated with Cyrene and the Demiurge, as Cyrene fell asleep under the tree, becoming the butterfly traveling on the hero's journey, only to wake up again as the Demiurge at the end of the story. Needless to say, it's a pretty big theme for the world building as a whole, and it is not for no reason that the Penrose Staircase represents the universe in Honkai Star Rail. Penrose Staircase is Penrose's theory of an eternally rescaling universe. The conformal cyclic cosmology, where the entropy is renormalized to zero, the samsara of our universe, but at the same time, it is the dream staircase from Nolan's Inception, the bigger cave and perpetual dream that we have never managed to wake up from. What we have experienced so far from 1.0 to 3.7 are likely not all from the same timeline, and we are seeing the experience of multiple trailblazers across many different timelines, following the oniric structure of the Inception and Kafka on the shore. Only that, at the end of all things in every timeline so far, the finality sleeps on, muttering of omens in their sleep, not knowing that our journey has already ended. In their dream, the finality travels against the current, fueling the eternal recurrence of the Penrose Staircase, turning it into a perpetual motion machine, a raccoon on a hamster wheel. After all, the world card represents the long journey from the Fool to the first card of the Magician, to the reunion of the two halves under the world tree. Then the journey is reset once more to the Fool. In a way, if you're familiar with the Mars plot, you can see that this is also the exact same plot for Layla in the Mars simulation, and it's also the exact same plot for Phanon as a parallel of Nanook in the Amphoreus simulation. Albeit, like Phanon, Nanook is probably just holding the fort until we could actually become Akivili again, when we finally restart the cycle to the next timeline, or to move it forward into the multiverse. In a similar vein, Zagrus and Cypher's plot told us that Aha is the creator of the lies that are maintaining the current universe we know. After 3.7, a big Zagrus was at the Demiurge Matrix, and they would give us a quest. To complete the quest, we need to fly through the loop set up by Zagrus, eventually ending up at the destination, which is the end of the ceremonial staff used by Cyrene. The achievement of that quest is portal configuration theory, which is basically the study of cause and effect as a chain instead of by a single factor alone. In other words, the quest is a big metaphor for Noose Fourth Instant. By leading us away from Noose chains of causality, Aha is protecting reality from the snip-snip of Noose Scissor, much like what Cypher and Zagrus did in Amphoreus. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that they're also hiding a piece of Akivili inside their stomach. But more critically, with Kafka holding the same spot as Aglaea as the leader of the Flame Chase, this means that the Trailblaze is the Flame Chase itself, and the true purpose of the Stellar Hunters, or more accurately, the Core Flame Hunters, are to recreate Akivili from us, so that the universe can move forward beyond the eternal recurrence, to the next samsara cycle.
你是为了银河的愿望而启程的，在以你为主角的故事里，宇宙会逃离终末的命运。
In the flame chase under Akivili, the heirs will take the core flames from the gods to become the new generations of gods, for the world is not shouldered by a single person, but everyone is the deliverer, a hero of their own journey. But what awaits the end of the journey, when the story is written in reverse? Well, if the story keeps getting reset in the eternal recurrence, then nothing would happen. The current gods would stay gods, and the nameless we know would not become titans, eons, exactly like in the eternal recurrences of Amphoreus Phase 4. However, if the eternal recurrence is ever broken, If the trailblaze can lead the stars to defy the destiny of finality, the meaning of the end, or the unknown beginning, is the godhood of the next samsara, the magnum opus, when blood-red rubido of humanity is turned into gold of gods. In other words, the current eons used to be nameless, and the nameless we are traveling with will become new eons, exactly like Amphireus' two types of time loop. It's not just Kafka and March, it's all of them, if we ever break free of the eternal recurrence, that is. In some versions of the world card, as is the version used in Genshin, there is a tree under which the twins will be reunited, completing the alchemical ritual of magnum opus. The tree is the Axis Mundi, the world tree made out of memories in all Hoyoverse games. Under the tree is the Sea of Quanta, in which cut-off branches would fall into, and in which the Leviathan Oroboros lies underneath, as the dragon Nidhogg of Norse mythology. It is under this tree that the twins, or lovers, in some versions of the tarot deck, would reunite again and reclaim the throne of the world. In Kafka on the Shore, this tree is the wood in which Kafka met the young Saki. By the end of the story, she has changed his destiny, and he has changed hers, allowing her to return to rest in the past forever. As Kafka escaped from the wood, in the parallel world, Hoshino, whose name means the stars, must kill the snake-like creature to break the Oedipal curse and break free from the eternal recurrence. The long journey has ended, and a new journey must begin, and finally, you finally fall asleep. Love and destruction is not the truth. A story that starts with love must end with love. And when you wake up, it's true. You are part of a brand new world.
Till